focus mostly on the central Mediterranean route. So that's the route that leads up through North Africa, Libya, across to Italy. This is based on a presentation actually that was given by my colleague from IOM Italy when she came over to the UK for Anti-Slavery Day last year. And as a result of the presentation, there was a couple of articles in the media in the UK picking up on this topic. And Lewis from Fences and Frontiers saw that and thought it was worth kind of repeating some of those key messages and then kind of thinking about that more in the UK context. A quick word on me. So I'm from the UK office of the International Organization for Migration, and I oversee our activities on human trafficking and modern slavery. But the focus of my presentation for tonight is not based on the UK, as I said, it's based a bit more on kind of Italy activities. In case you don't know very much about IOM, we're not a very well-known entity in the UK, so just a bit of an overview. So we were established in 1951 following the European crisis following World War II. We are an intergovernmental organisation, which means we're made up of member states. We have around 165 member state members, and UK is one of them. And our main principle is that dignified, orderly and safe migration benefits migrants as well as society. And this is the key message that IOM gives throughout all of its work and all of its project activities. So we do work bringing states together to advance understanding of migration issues, encourage kind of development through migration, both for migrants, the host countries and the sending countries, and of course upholding the well-being of migrants. And since September of last year, we entered the United Nations system, and we're now known as the United Nations Migration Agency, and I think that just reflects the increasing priority of member states to kind of better address issues around migration. So counter-trafficking has been a core activity of IOM since 1994. This is something that we do across the globe. We work on kind of these broad areas that we call technical cooperation, so really that's assisting governments to strengthen their own response to human trafficking. So that's thinking about their policy, their legal framework, their understanding about the issue. That's a lot of training, a lot of building protocols and systems, and also helping them to have systems in place such as shelters and support mechanisms. We also do some direct assistance ourselves, and as it's got up here, we assisted 70,000 people since 1994. We've got a new data collaborative that's also mentioned up there, and that's hopefully going to be launched this summer, where 60,000 of those cases, which is a combination of IOM cases and Polaris, which is a US NGO, will be brought together on a platform that's accessible to everybody to look at kind of data and trends, obviously in an anonymised way. And I guess the focus now, I'll use the term, the DTM is the focus of what I'll be talking about for the rest of the presentation. It's what we call the displacement tracking matrix, and it's IOM's system of kind of monitoring and looking at what migrant flows and movements have been taking place across the globe. So thinking about the central Mediterranean route, just to give you a kind of bit of an overview. So in 2016 we had 181,000 people making that journey, and this year so far we've got 36,000 people have made that journey, and just this year alone we've had over 1,000 deaths on that route, and it is the most lethal journey that a migrant can take. And the figures have fluctuated more or less over the last 3 years, but we had the biggest peak that we've seen in 2014, but the numbers are still increasing and very high at the moment. The Italian Coast Guard report that more and more smugglers are using rubber dinghies, which are particularly overloaded. The countries that we're seeing are mostly West African nationals, but over this year in 2017 we've seen an increase of Bangladeshis. So Bangladeshis are actually coming into Libya either through Turkey or through Dubai and then making the journey overseas from Libya. We are what IOM and most agencies call mixed flows. They're a combination of people who are seeking asylum, people who are seeking better opportunities, people who are seeking family reunion. It's a real kind of mix of different people who are making that journey. So just to give you an overview of what IOM is doing in Italy, so we're at the landing sites, so that's in Sicily, Lampedusa and Apulia, and we've been working there for the last 5 years, and our main activities there are to provide migrants with a kind of initial information briefing, so giving them a very rapid overview of what their rights are, and then also trying to screen for the most vulnerable migrants who are in those groups. So looking out for the youngest people, the unaccompanied minors, also particular groups such as groups of young girls who are travelling together who may be potential victims of trafficking. And they also monitor the reception standards, and so that's the work that's ongoing by the Italian authorities as well as other agencies, and that's a kind of mixed responsibility. And then we also look at what's happening in the accommodation centres, which is where people are moved to from the arrival points. And one of the activities that we're doing is what we call the displacement tracking matrix, as I've mentioned to you before. So overall, this captures kind of a lot of demographic information. It looks at who's basically making that journey, where do they come from, what's their profile. And so obviously we've got 87% making that journey are males. 24% are aged between 14 and 17. That's actually quite a significant number. That's higher than you'll see on the Eastern Mediterranean route, as I'll mention in a moment. But 6% of the people in that age range are travelling with family, which means that over 90% of the people in that age range are travelling unaccompanied. But the overall average age is 22 and a half, and as I've mentioned before, they're mostly West African, so the nationalities are kind of Nigerians, Ghanaians, Gambians, although there are also some coming from Horn of Africa, Eritrea, Somalia, etc. Within the displacement tracking matrix, we have a very specific module called the flow monitoring survey. So this is where we try and speak to people for a slightly extended period of time. And through this module, we're looking at proxy indicators for trafficking on the journey that they've already made. So this is what's happened pre-departure from Libya, before they arrived in Italy. And we're looking at these sort of indicators such as, have you been forced to work? Or did you work with the promise of payment and then you weren't paid as a result? Were you held against your will? And obviously, the indicators for the Central Mediterranean route are really quite shocking. Over 70% of people are reporting positively to at least one of those indicators. And you've got around 50% responding positively to at least two indicators. And that's something that they're self-reporting about their own experience. So of the people who are responding positively to the indicator, most often they're talking about being held against their will. But there are also the other indicators as well about offers of cash for blood, body parts. West Africans are most often targeted, or the people who most often respond positively to these indicators. And the longer the journey, obviously, the more likely it is that they've experienced exploitation. So as soon as the journey's reached a year or more, the indicator goes up to 81%. And of course, Libya is the most riskiest part of the journey. So it's where 90% of the people who respond positively to the indicators say that their exploitation experience took place in Libya. And I think, as we all know, it's obviously experiencing major security instances. It's a kind of a non-functioning government, militias, a lot of organised crime. It's just a major enabling environment for this kind of activity to take place. There's widespread detention of migrants from all different parties. Formal government agencies, but also informal government agencies as well. And that's obviously the kind of context in which a lot of people have experienced these specific indicators. And just to quickly compare to the Eastern Mediterranean route, so IOM is also doing the same survey and asking for the same questions around these 6 proxy indicators on the Eastern route. But that's spread between different countries, so that includes Greece, but it also includes Macedonia, Slovenia and Serbia, but they're asking the same questions of migrants, and the responses that they're getting are much lower indicators of trafficking. So around 15% are responding positively to one indicator of trafficking. And I could just put up there some of the reasons that we think that that's the case. So obviously the journey that they've taken is usually a lot shorter, tend to travel in family groups, and that becomes a kind of protective factor. And generally the countries that they come through, the transit countries, are slightly more secure than the countries that people transit through on the Central Mediterranean route. So going back to the specific Italian context, what IOM in Italy is doing is really being focused on looking at Nigerian women. So Nigerian women are disproportionately represented in the migration flows that are coming on the Central Mediterranean route, and they're often showing indicators of trafficking. But also there's indicators of trafficking can be from their experience on the journey up to the point of Italy, but also indicators as to what might happen to them post-arrival. So a lot of kind of suspect situations where they need to call a specific person to mention that they've arrived safely. If they are transferred to a safe accommodation location, they quite rapidly disappear. And so IOM's kind of been focused on this particular issue. They've been working with cultural mediators, and those cultural mediators have been able to overcome some of the kind of language and cultural barriers to try and engage the migrants at the point of arrival. As you can imagine, it's a really short period of time that you have to speak to people, and it's about trying to build trust in that very short period of time, and provide information and access to information. And then if the individuals consent to going into a support centre, often one aspect that IOM considers important is that they're not in very large groups of young Nigerian girls together, because often then if one of them returns or contacts a trafficker, then it becomes a process that affects all of the girls. So these are just some figures from last year, just to show the kind of significant increase in the number of Nigerian arrivals. So it was only up to August as the latest figures I could get, but already in August last year, the number was reaching the figure that had been reached in 2015. And you can see that there's a really high number of unaccompanied minors within the Nigerian female group. And of those, they're getting a lot of information at the landing point from IOM, and IOM considers, from their own indicators, that around 75% of those are potential victims of trafficking. But only 218 are actually referred for ongoing support and services, because it's about achieving that trust and consent in that very short period of time for people to access services. So these are kind of some of those indicators that IOM Italy is working with, that obviously talk about, as I mentioned, the younger age. They tend to be in groups of 4 to 5, and they might be accompanied by an older lady or a madam. Often it's the eldest child who's travelling. I think that's to do with cultural norms, and they're often from poorer families. I've just mentioned there some of the states that they originally come from, and some of this is also detected in the UK, some of the UK's figures. In Italy, it's most often they come from Edo, Delta, and Lagos State. And I think maybe something that people may be aware of, but there's often use of kind of juju rituals with Nigerian young women to kind of a process that kind of binds them to the trafficker, or binds them to a situation of debt where they have to commit under an oath or an arrangement that they will kind of repay that debt. And they may be subject to violence on the journey, most specifically at kind of crossing points. That's when the situation gets more precarious, and some of those girls arrive pregnant, having become pregnant on the journey. So these are just some of the challenges around why it's so difficult to kind of engage in that very short period of time that we're talking to migrants at the point of arrival and trying to convince them to access kind of support services that are available to them. And as I mentioned, there's a lot to do with this kind of like fear of juju rituals and other forms of retaliation against the individual themselves or their family members. There's also a sense of gratitude towards their traffickers. At this point, it could be that there's no exploitation that's taken place. They've just arrived, and they've genuinely believe that they're coming for the right opportunities and that this is a kind of new life for them. And they often only really trust other Nigerians, and so if a kind of Italian person is trying to give them information about what might happen to them, they should access referral services or go into a reception centre, they're not likely to trust them. They do kind of not necessarily understand the concept of the debt that they've entered, or the kind of the size of the debt as well. And they obviously have quite strong expectations about what they may be able to sort of access, or the life they may be able to lead in Europe. And of course, at this point, as I mentioned, they don't necessarily see themselves as victims of anything. They may have had a very specifically traumatic journey, but they think that on the point of arrival to Italy, things will change. They're entering Europe, they have access to kind of new opportunities. And so, of course, at that point, if you're trying to tell them they're a victim or a potential victim of trafficking, it's very difficult to get them to kind of understand that concept. And just some additional resources that I think might be of interest to you. So IOM Italy's developed this campaign called Aware Migrants. So they've taken testimonies of migrants who've made that journey before and the experiences that they've faced. And that is on this website called Aware Migrants. It's really good if you want to have a look. And of course, it's about making sure that the message that is being sort of delivered to other potential migrants comes from migrants who've experienced themselves. It really isn't a message that can be delivered by kind of international agencies or NGOs. It has to be kind of hearing it from a voice that's experienced the same thing that you may potentially experience. And then in addition, this is basically everything that comes out of that displacement tracking matrix goes into this website. and it's a live update website. So as the numbers change, as the routes change, all of these, the thickness of the lines will change. Each bubble, if you hover over the bubble, is going to give you information about the number of migrants who are moving on that particular route. Also gives you information about missing migrants, number of migrant deaths at each place. And there's also a kind of documents page on there, so all of the reports that I've been referring to tonight, the flow monitoring surveys, the DTM, all of that information is on there. So if you want to get a bit more information about that, and also think more on the Eastern Mediterranean route, then you can use that website. And that's it.